This Part 3B video provides my comments on the proposed child tax credit in the 1.75 trillion Build Back Better plan and solutions for funding it. Hello friends, this is Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, where I provide a unique analysis of world events based on the unmasked truth that after surrender, Germany continued World War II clandestinely and became a killing machine. I also provide true news that you will find nowhere else. In Part 3A video, we discussed the pros and cons of the proposed 225 billion child tax credit and looked at the need for it by looking at the family side of the equation. In this video, we look at the business or employer side of the equation to find solutions for the desperate hardships faced by families. Business competition is global. Japan and Germany created monopolies or duopolies in most industries, and the nations provided their corporations all possible help to compete globally. The German and Japanese corporations entered the American market and drove our companies out of business. In my July 29, 2021 video titled Is Apple a Monopoly? Epic versus Apple Lawsuit, How the US Should Deal with Big Tech, I discussed how the US should deal with big tech companies. After providing a brief history of American businesses after World War II, I stated the following. To remain successful even in one's own country, the country's corporations must compete globally. To compete globally, they must be highly profitable and financially strong. That almost necessitates that they dominate the US market in their chosen sectors as monopolies or near monopolies. That's how Microsoft, IBM, Boeing kept America in the global business game while our other industries were being battered into extinction by Japanese and German firms during the 1970s to 1990s. Therefore, making decisions to curb monopolies or near monopolies, taking into account competition only in America by breaking them up or putting other restraints on them would be short-sighted. The Japanese and German strategy is now being followed ruthlessly by China and India with the rise of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's cronies, the Ambanis and Adani, and others like the Tatas. It's better to have our own companies be financially strong in America, necessitating that they become monopolies or near monopolies in their chosen sectors and take on all other players globally. That being said, if we allow free rein to monopolies or duopolies, each will have a tendency to take as large a chunk of the consumer's disposable income as possible. There is no limit to which these companies want to grow in revenues and profits. The compensation of the managers depends on it. Therefore, if these companies are allowed free rein to do whatever they want and charge whatever prices the market will bear, they will squeeze the very lifeblood out of the consumer, the disposable income for their products and services, and attempt to annihilate competition in the process. That prediction about corporations squeezing the disposable income of consumers is a reality today in America. For the sake of being globally competitive, we have allowed our companies to buy up competitors and become near monopolies, duopolies, or 3 to 4 firm oligopolies in virtually every industry. As a result, they've been able to charge near monopoly prices to maximize their profits and squeeze the consumer as much as possible. On the other hand, they pay their employees as little as they can. For decades, McDonald's, Walmart, Kroger, Target, Amazon, and others paid their employees as low as $7.25 an hour, the federal minimum wage, or near it. As a result, perhaps as high as 90% of their employees had to depend on and were receiving some form of welfare benefits, food stamps, Medicaid, housing assistance to survive. These companies were making huge profits by charging as high prices to their consumers as they could and paying their employees as little as they could get away with. Thus, the government was subsidizing these companies, which subsidies were being used by them indirectly to make huge profits. Here is the example of how McDonald's does business globally. In Denmark, employees are paid $22 an hour, 6 weeks paid vacation, and have a pension plan. All Danes have free health care. In the United States, many are paid less than $10 per hour, no paid vacation and no pension plan, and most frontline workers probably don't qualify for health care insurance, particularly at franchise stores. Price of a Big Mac in Denmark is $4.82, whereas in the United States it is $5.81 average. That is how the same company is exploiting American workers, whereas it is forced to operate under different rules in other countries. While the lower level employees are making low wages, owners, that is, major shareholders, corporate executives, and senior managers were making out like bandits and were being compensated extremely well. They major shareholders became some of the richest persons in the world. As proof, let's look at the revenues and profits of some USA Fortune 1000 companies in 2021. The first figure I will state is the revenues and then the profits. Walmart, $559.1 billion, profits $13.5 billion. Amazon, $386 billion in revenues, $21 billion in profits. Apple, $275 billion revenues, $57 billion profits. Berkshire Hathaway, $246 billion revenues, $43 billion profits. Alphabet or Google, $183 billion revenues, $40 billion profits. Microsoft, $143 billion revenues, $44 billion profits. JP Morgan Chase, $130 billion and then $29 billion profits. Verizon, $128 billion, $18 billion profits. Bank of America, $94 billion, $18 billion profits. Target, $94 billion, $4.4 billion profits. Citigroup, $89 billion revenues, $11 billion profits. Meta Platforms or Facebook, $86 billion revenues, $29 billion profits. Johnson & Johnson, $83 billion revenues, $15 billion profits. Procter & Gamble, $71 billion revenues, $13 billion profits. Goldman Sachs, $54 billion revenues, $10 billion profits. Morgan Stanley, $52 billion revenues, $11 billion profits. Cisco System, $49 billion revenues, $11 billion profits. Pfizer, $42 billion revenues, $10 billion profits. PNC Financial Services, 24 and then $7.5 billion profits. Visa, $22 billion revenues, $11 billion profits. McDonald's, $19 billion revenues, nearly $8 billion profits. Adobe, $13 billion revenues, $5 billion profits. eBay, $11 billion revenues, nearly $6 billion in profits. The only companies not making exorbitant profits these days are the retailers Walmart, Amazon, and Target, because there is still competition in retailing, and they have started paying slightly better wages, but not a living wage still, to their frontline workers and have to invest in the businesses because of global competition. Others have made obscene profits, particularly the banks, after paying their executives and senior managers lavishly, but in many cases paying their workers exploitative wages because corporations hold greater bargaining power over the workers. Now look at the cash and investments position of some of these companies. Apple, $203 billion, Alphabet, $169 billion, Microsoft, $132 billion, Amazon, $86 billion, Meta Platforms, $55 billion, and Pfizer, $51 billion. This is made possible because some of these companies, being near monopolies or duopolies, can charge their customers whatever prices they want, squeezing the middle and poor classes, while their workers could be paid better. While most employees, but not all, at Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Meta Platforms are paid relatively well, many are still being exploited by being hired as contractors, with average contractor salary being $81,550 per year at Microsoft, the range being $45,000 to $140,000 per year. Consider the exorbitant profits made by banks. Banks earn money in two broad ways: the fees they charge their individual and business customers, and the interest rate spread, which is the difference between the rate they charge their individual or business customers and the rate they pay their depositors plus their operating expenses. Fees come out of the pockets of individuals. Even fees paid by business customers are passed on to individuals as part of the prices charged. Consider housing. Real estate developers must pay fees and interest to their banks. Construction companies constructing the housing also pay the banks for the loans they take out, which ultimately the home buyer pays as part of the price of the house. If you are renting, these costs are part of your rent. Then individuals pay fees and interest on their mortgages. Thus, ultimately, the money to make huge profits by the banks comes out of the pockets of the vast mass of the middle and poor class. Big corporations have the bargaining power and they are using it to the hilt to squeeze the middle and poor classes out of their disposable income. Their aim is to extract the highest prices they can from the consumer. While an industry may have many competitors rather than being a duopoly or oligopoly, the firms can still charge high prices across the industry because follow the leader is a well known pricing strategy. When one firm raises prices, everyone in the industry raises prices by the same percentage. Competition does not drive prices down necessarily for the consumer in such industries. This too is freakonomics. I would not call these corporate bosses evil. They are no less rational in their decision making than the single mother who is the fourth in her generation living entirely on welfare. The tax code allows them to do these things legally. Which human would not take advantage of it? But the big difference is that they influence the tax code by funding the election campaigns of congressmen who will vote for cutting taxes. That needs to change. But before discussing taxes, let's consider the impact of the corporate bosses and the rich getting richer. Because of high prices and high cost of living, the middle and poor classes cannot save much. But when the rich get richer, they have more money for investment. They buy more stocks, raising valuations through the roof, quite irrationally. The poor and middle class cannot easily fully participate in the stock market individually because they cannot afford to buy a single share of Amazon and Google at $2,300 or $3,000 per share and a Berkshire Hathaway share at $480,000. The middle class simply does not have the money to buy one single share of Berkshire Hathaway stock. They can still participate in the market through ETFs and mutual funds, but then the fund managers make a killing through fees and get rich, which comes out of the pockets of the individual poor and middle class investors. The fund or ETF may do well or may not, but the fund managers are whistling or singing daily in their bathrooms. Life is very good for them. With so much free money of the rich sloshing around the economy looking for investments to make killer returns, we see the middle and poor classes being further squeezed in housing costs. I live in Tampa, Florida, which is one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. Home values have gone up by 33.2% over the past year and will experience double digit growth in the next 12 months. A result? A hard-working family simply cannot afford to buy a home as the investors are beating their offers and paying in cash. These investors are buying these properties and renting them out, and the average rent in the past year for single-family homes, condo units, and small multi-unit buildings increased by more than 28% over the past year from 1,561 to 1,999 last per month. See what that does to the budget of a example family in video 3A with its disposable income of 18,460 to 21,460 per year. That's the result of a few getting rich by squeezing the rest of us out of every penny of our disposable income. I'm not implying that these real estate investors are evil, but this situation is the result of the rich getting richer. Some sort of temporary safety net with block grants to states and cities could lessen the burden when such difficult situations develop temporarily in particular locations, and these safety nets need to be funded. These are not Robin Hood policies. The situation has developed because, in our quest to develop our corporations to be global competitors, we have allowed the rich to get richer and exploit the workers by paying them as little as the market would bear. They must be willing to fund some of the safety net programs through taxes. Now, a little discussion on competition is in order here. We are saving our corporations from unhealthy competition in a dog eat dog world kind of scenario. If we did not allow consolidation in industries through mergers and acquisitions, we would have many competitors, some operating at the lowest end of the market with shoddy, dangerous products, not making much money themselves, and not allowing others to make decent money also. It would also be easy for foreign well funded competitors to take over industries, again, as happened in the 1960s and 1980s. For allowing them an easier environment to operate in, corporate bosses must operate with compassion for their employees as well as their customers. But government cannot always trust every corporate boss who may not have had life experiences that enable him or her to empathize with the middle and poor class or their employees. They simply don't know that their business policies are causing desperate hardship for even the middle class. In these cases, government can help such citizens by taxing the rich who benefited from the positive, healthy business environment created for them by government action and allowing mergers and acquisitions. If business resists such government actions through shenanigans, then government could always reluctantly unleash the Federal Trade Commission to break them up to increase competition. Now, my eyes were opened to this data only 1 or 2 months ago when I started researching into the issue of making the child tax credit of $300 per month for children up to 6 years and $250 per month for children from 6 to 17 years permanent. By the way, I would even go further and raise the child tax credit to $3,600 to $4,500 per year, as Senators Mike Lee of Utah and Marco Rubio of Florida suggested. Such policies will definitely raise the happiness index in America, bringing it close to what it is in most European countries. So, how do we tackle this issue? Don't expect the rich corporate bosses to do this voluntarily. Badgering them with this data will shame some to give concessions. Hopefully, Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Meta platforms will change their behavior and not exploit people through the avenue of using some of them as contractors or pay them more than $45,000 to $140,000 per year and pay their store employees and call center agents more. They do such things so that they can increase their annual profits from $54 billion to $57 billion or from $41 billion to $44 billion in the case of Microsoft. They should be ashamed of themselves. The Great Resignation was another step in the right direction. Hopefully, corporate bosses will value their employees a little more. Another solution can probably be working towards gradually raising the minimum wage, a step the state and local governments should take. Another step could be unionization, which I can never recommend for the simple reason that professionals will take over the unions whose sole purpose would be to extract whatever they can for the employees without consideration for the financial needs of the business. Union bosses were responsible for destroying American manufacturing in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, making them easy targets for Japanese and German firms, leading to their demise. So I can never recommend that step. They will hobble American businesses again, and German masqueraders and their allies in our midst will exploit such an opportunity to the hilt. A reasonable safety net for the working class and children has to be a necessary part of the solution, which must be funded through taxes. The solution was advertised very well by U.S. House Rep. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, very well on her white dress to a party in striking red letters, "Tax the Rich." Do you think the rich will advocate that? Not most, though Bill Gates, George Soros, and even Warren Buffett have stated that the rich should be taxed higher. But do you think the other rich will readily agree and ask the government to tax them? Not a chance. They funded the elections of candidates who then voted for the tax cuts for them. Now, a rich man who has $20 million wants to accumulate 100 million. One who has 100 million strives to become a billionaire. One who has 1 to 2 billion wants to accumulate $10 billion for his posterity, and they vie with each other to become the richest man or woman in the world. Don't expect them to ask Congress to raise their taxes and fund elections of candidates who are running on the platforms of raising taxes to fund safety net programs for the poor and children. So, first thing we should understand about taxation is that if taxes can be raised, they can also be lowered later when the increased taxes have served their purpose. In the same way, safety net programs for the poor can be voted in and later removed when no longer needed. Nothing should be cast in stone. Clearly, in the present situation, funding is needed for safety net programs till the other solutions outlined kick in, which may take some years. And then the safety net programs can only be funded by taxing the rich. Do not trust the same people, mainly the Republicans, who voted for tax cuts for the rich, to vote for increasing taxes on the rich. Only the Democrats can deliver that. Also, they need to give the IRS the $70 billion in additional funding it needs to equitably apply the tax laws for all taxpayers. For religious reasons, I do not get into politics and have never voted in my life and do not intend to vote ever. For the same reason, I refrain from advocating voting for either Republicans or Democrats. I also draw the line at murder, which I can never endorse, and abortion is murder. I will address that issue shortly in another message in a video on my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini. For this reason, I simply cannot endorse Democrat candidates who are pro-abortion. Also, please remember, Roe vs. Wade decision was taken by a masquerader-led court, and free access to abortion and counseling through Planned Parenthood was a German masquerader-led conspiracy to limit the growth of the white population of non-German ancestry so that they could exterminate non-German whites and take over the country. Because the US Supreme Court has given us a window of opportunity to allow me to speak my mind on this issue, I hope the 5 conservative justices stand firm on their leaked decision on reversing Roe vs. Wade and that Chief Justice Roberts joins them. The decision would then leave it up to the states to make their own laws. I hope the Democrats don't get a supermajority to make abortion the law of the land after that, or the Supreme Court would again strike down any such law as unconstitutional. But regarding taxing the rich, the Democrats are the best hope, and that hope can be realized in less than 6 months in the November 2022 midterm election. I hope American voters will be wise and elect representatives who will stop the rich from fleecing a squeezing middle class and poor America and vote to tax them to provide funding for safety net programs and relief for the working class. They are also the best hope for stopping the excesses of the banking sector by putting a limit on fees and possibly limiting the spread in interest rates between what they charge their customers and pay to their depositors. Remember, taxes can be raised and also lowered. So can restrictions on banks and other industries be put in place and later removed as the situation warrants to protect working Americans or to keep American businesses competitive around the world. The voter can also guard against continuing to vote for congressmen who may give in to the Robin Hood complex and continue to sock it to the rich to lavish money on the poor. The voter and the media need to be ever vigilant. I like the Democrat proposal to not raise taxes for families earning less than $400,000. This will protect small entrepreneurs also who are working very hard to make a living. The Republican middle class and the middle class in general should not fall for the ploy of cutting taxes for the middle class to justify cutting taxes for the rich. The rich will get richer and business will be able to squeeze the excess disposable income with the middle class by raising prices to what the market will bear, so that in the final analysis the middle class will stay where it is but the rich will get richer. Also, please don't fall for the argument that capital in the hands of the rich funds entrepreneurs and government should lay off it. And entrepreneurs create jobs, which is true. But the reality is that after taxes, there will still be plenty of capital left in the hands of venture capitalists. Entrepreneurs don't necessarily and usually don't have the capital to fund their own ventures. After the proposed taxes to fund safety net programs, there will still be plenty of capital left in the hands of the rich to invest with venture capitalists who can fund entrepreneurs and their ventures. Entrepreneurial people will still keep thinking of innovative ventures to make a decent living for their families. I hope the American voters follow my suggestion during the upcoming election and elect a sufficient number of people to the Congress who will correct the inequities that have developed in our country, in our economy. After that, I'll go back to my old self and stay out of politics and let the voters decide whether they want to vote Republican or Democrat. So let's now get God's perspective on the economic situation, mainly in America, as given through prophecies in the Bible. When God gave his prophecies to Isaiah the prophet, the northern house of Israel, whose descendants include America and British Commonwealth nations, was being taken into captivity by the Assyrians. But Isaiah's prophecies are dual. They apply to the house of Israel in his time and also apply in the end time, meaning our time. When prophecies were given to Jeremiah and Ezekiel the prophets, the house of Israel had already been in captivity for more than 130 years. Therefore, prophecies concerning the house of Daniel given to these prophets, Daniel and Ezekiel, apply only to our time. Now, God's anger against us was delivered through Ezekiel the prophet in Ezekiel 22:29-30. The people of the land have used oppression and exercised robbery, and have vexed the poor and needy. Yea, they have oppressed the stranger wrongfully. And by the Apostle James in the New Testament, James wrote in chapter 5, verses 4 to 6. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, cries. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. You have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. You have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter, and he does not resist you. Hire of laborers means not paying them sufficiently for their work, because if they were not paid at all, they would not work. Now, God also admonished through Isaiah the prophet about what we should do in Isaiah 58, beginning in verse 6. Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to deal your bread to the hungry, and that you bring the poor that are cast out to your house? When you see the naked, that you cover him, and that you hide not yourself from your own flesh, meaning your own very close family. Then shall your light break forth as the morning, and your health shall spring forth speedily, and your righteousness shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your reward. Then shall you call, and the Lord shall answer. You shall cry, and he shall say, Here I am. If you take away from the midst of you the yoke, the putting forth of the finger, the speaking of vanity, and if you draw out your soul to the hungry and satisfy the afflicted soul, then shall your light shine in the obscurity, and your darkness as in the noonday. Yes, Isaiah the prophet is talking about safety net programs for the middle class and the poor, provided for by the rich. Since the rich won't do it voluntarily, righteous rulers must do it through taxation and legislation. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please continue to watch my videos and read my articles on important world events, World War III watch, politics, international business, advice on health and medical problems, and much more for in-depth and insightful analysis. Please also subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook channels, Unmasked Truth with Harmanjit Saini, to view and get information on the latest videos. Some people do not have the time to go through the full length of videos. They find it more convenient to read the text of the video. Unfortunately, YouTube does not provide the capability to make the text of my videos available on YouTube. But fortunately, Facebook does provide that capability. So I make the text of my videos available on my Facebook channel, which you can easily copy.